Talk about drugs, because you wrote a big piece this weekend about it.
Well, I was astonished because the Washington Post, which must be one of the most liberal newspapers in the world, came out a few days ago with an amazing story from Porto, in the second city of Portugal, basically pointing out that the supposed magical experiment in drug semi-legalization in Portugal has in fact led to rising crime, much more squalor, increasing danger on the streets, and increasing demands by politicians in Portugal. They should go back to enforcing the law, which they gave up officially doing, I think, in 2001. The truth is that what happened in Portugal was that they hadn't been enforcing the law with any rigor for some years, and they just made that formal.
Right.
So it got worse, but not instantly worse. And the claims were made by all the supposed libertarians, like the Cato Institute, and all the drug legalizers, that Portugal was a kind of drug paradise example for everybody. Every time I went on a debate on the BBC about drug legalization, the first question the presenter would ask me, well, what about Portugal then?
Yes.
And to combat this, I would have to go to the most enormous detail about the matter, and it basically I was bulldozed by what about Portugal, and then of course you also get people saying, well, what about Amsterdam and how fantastically successful it is? Well, in Amsterdam too, they've now, in the red light district, they've actually banned the public smoking of marijuana, because people who live in Amsterdam are absolutely sick of it and said, we don't want any more of these zombies coming here.
And they've sort of flip-flopped on it, but I'm not sure where it is now, but at one point they banned tourism of all kinds, didn't they, from going and buying marijuana.
They hate people who actually, in the Netherlands, who actually live there, they hate this. They loathe the way in which Amsterdam has become a zombie city, and not just a zombie city, but quite serious gangsterism of a murderous kind has risen on the back of the Amsterdam reputation for being a drugs free-for-all. Right. And it has not worked. And then on top of that, you get the increasing news from Canada and from Colorado and California and the other American states, and now New York, the other which have legalized marijuana, of the complete failure of this to do the one thing all the legalizers said. They said, if you legalize it, you'll put the gangs and the criminals out of business. It will all go legitimate. But what actually happens is that the gangs and the criminals stay in business, undercutting the legal outlets, and you have two sources. Timid people who are afraid to break the law can buy marijuana, which they couldn't before, so you have more marijuana consumption. Right. It's in some cases it's actually advertised, but at the same time the drug gangs still control a huge part of the trade, avoiding the tax and avoiding any attempt at regulation. That's what actually happens.
And also what they've done.
But the legalizers still come. I did a debate a week ago on another channel with a retired police officer who claimed this same thing, that if we legalized, then they would put the gangs out of business. It is demonstrably, it's proven untrue. They still say it. So here we have this thing, and what I recommend it was that the BBC might actually open that copy of the Washington Post, which must be lying somewhere in their headquarters. I know they've been busy, and they should look at this themselves, and let's see some proper TV on the so-called Portuguese drug paradise and how it actually operates, and the Amsterdam one too, and then people might stop talking this rubbish.
And while you're at it, they can have a look at California, and they can have a look.
They certainly can.
I've been there since it's been legalised, and you know, California's in a hell of a mess, not just because of the drugs, but it's not helping, because people are now taking drugs which are being manufactured artificially by the drug dealers, who are getting them onto fentanyl and all sorts of other things.
Sure.
Because they've worked out that we can have multiple markets, and guess what? The drug dealers and the criminal gangs aren't just going to give up doing what makes them millions of pounds a day. Another
interesting thing, the National Post, a conservative Canadian newspaper, has recently done a story in which they've said that the crime of a certain type has recently increased rather startlingly in Canada. And this crime is of completely irrational attacks in the street, often actually fatal.
Right.
There's no real explanation for this, it seems to me, that doesn't include people being mentally ill. And mental illness is, as I say over and over again, so strongly correlated with marijuana use that I really do think the fact that this sort of crime is on the increase in Canada, not long after the legalization of the sale of marijuana from open outlets, seems to me to suggest maybe we should look into this. Maybe this rush to legalize needs to be halted. Now, there's a very interesting thing in this country. The House of Commons Home Affairs Committee has 3 times this century has produced reports, or has conducted inquiries into the drug issue. The first 2 of them the second of which I tried to give evidence to, I did give evidence to for all the good it did me, have come out saying that they're basically in favour of liberalisation. One of them, in fact, David Cameron sat on. The third, they've completed their inquiries. Again, I gave them some written evidence. They didn't want to talk to me. They've completed their inquiries, and the report is due out in August. I am really, really hoping that on this occasion we don't get another call for liberalisation of laws.
Well, this government and many governments before it have been kind of schizophrenic, haven't they, about it? Because they've sort of tinkered with the idea, perhaps, of making marijuana a Class A drug, then a Class B drug, then a Class C drug, and they sort of go up and down. They don't seem to be sure what they're about. There's
a very complicated thing going on here, and it's been going on since 1971. The distinction being made between different drugs was first made in the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act, and the whole point of it was to give marijuana a separate, less dangerous status from the bogeyman drugs.
Was that when they came up with the sort of class?
That's when the classifications were first put into the law, and marijuana was then Class B, and heroin and of course LSD, which was the huge bogeyman at the time, were both classified as Class A and were treated much more seriously. At the same time, they also began to make this, to me, increasingly absurd distinction between possessing the drug and trafficking it, so that trafficking it was something the police would still pursue and heavy penalties would be imposed for it. But possession was increasingly treated lightly and then over the years ignored. Now, the government can't do anything openly about this because we're bound by the 1961 Single Drugs Convention of the United Nations to have these laws against these drugs. But what they can do is just not enforce them. So whenever they're challenged, they say, no, we have these laws. We have no plans to change them. But whether they change them or not, the government knows perfectly well that the police and the courts have stopped enforcing them. So they have changed them, but they haven't changed them openly. So this paradox is also revealed in the US, where the federal government still maintains very strict laws against marijuana, but all the states don't.
Which apparently has created quite interesting fiscal problems for,
the marijuana
growers.
You can't use credit cards.
Well, you can't use credit cards. You also can't have a bank account.
So sad.
But you also can't have a bank account, apparently, if it's a federal bank. So if you've got a bank that has branches in every state, you can't open a bank account.
You just have to put your money in the old building and loan.
The reason I know this is because a guy that I know who used to be in the wine business has actually gone into the marijuana growing business because it's a lot more lucrative,
I should say.
And it's legal. And what they do is they now grow it sort of vertically in hydroponic warehouses where they can lock it and nobody can steal it. And he says basically what happens on tax day is people just literally turn up at the tax office with sacks fulls of money, of cash, to hand to the taxman. And that's the only way they can pay their taxes.
But there is a growing campaign, of course, to abolish the 1961 Single Convention, after which but both the United States and the United Kingdom, being members of the UN Security Council, cannot openly, I think, denounce and refuse to abide by a UN treaty, but they can covertly do so, and that's why governments speak with a forked tongue on this matter. They say, no, we have no plans to change the law, but the thing that to ask them when they say that, well, okay, well, do you have any plans to enforce it?
Yes.
To which the answer is no.
Yes. Well, this is now the way government runs in all areas. They say we're going to do something,
shoplifting,
and then they don't do anything.
Shoplifting has been decrimed by the police and the courts, with the result that you've seen the boss of
John Lewis
saying that our staff are now totally at the mercy, and when we call the police, they say they're busy. Again, the question has to be asked, what is it that they're busy doing? Because they're obviously not doing anything.
I walked into a sort of a largish shop in my local shopping centre, which had all but closed this kind of metal gate, so that you can only go in and out the space of one person, because their shoplifting problem is so horrendous.
Well, of course, if you can't,
because they had a wide open sort of opening area to go in.
The whole supermarket concept is destroyed by if you can't trust people.
Right.
And so eventually it boils down to smaller and smaller shops with bigger and bigger grids on the door. Or there's one supermarket near me where they only have electronic checkouts. There are no people, but you have to keep your receipt and
you have to show the QR code
to the reader to get out of the building. They won't let you out.
And that's fine with me.
It's a bit miserable, isn't it?
It's a bit miserable, but better than having some maniac rush past you with a bag full of goodies that he's just stolen, thereby putting the price up of the ones you're buying.
So do you have this? I mean, coming out of a Marks and Spencer's the other day, this happened to me twice now. I was walking close to the entrance, and somebody walked out right really close to me from behind.
Right.
And as I went out, the two of us together set off the alarm.
Right. Interesting.
And his idea
that's
was
a
obviously,
technique.
yeah, it confuses them, and so no one came after me.
Right.
But he was obviously trying to camouflage his own exit by doing this.
Right, interesting. It's like
Watch out for it.
It's like the people that follow you through the turnstile on the tube, which is another thing.
Yeah.
Unbelievable what's going on, but interesting.